It is a real honor to be here with my colleagues and to announce that more than 30 mayors from all over the country are joining forces to fight together for the immigration reform we so desperately need for this whole country, but particularly for the people of our cities. We are together filing a joint amicus brief in the U.S. District Court in Texas in support of the President's executive action on immigration. A lot of mayors around me from all over the country, from all regions. I'm going to name a few who are here or will be here, and then others you're going to hear from in just a moment. And I'm not going to be able to name everyone because some have joined us, but real cross-section of the country here, including Mayor Peduto of Pittsburgh, Mayor Hales of Portland, Oregon, Mayor Slay of St. Louis, Mayor Hodges of Minneapolis. Again, you'll hear from some of my colleagues in just a moment. The President's plan has the potential to grant support and relief to nearly 5 million of our fellow Americans who happen to be undocumented immigrants. And that will make a transcendent impact on these individuals and their families who are our constituents and who play a crucial role in our cities, in our economy, in the lives of our cities. Of course, we see a backlash against this reform, and a lawsuit, as I mentioned, has been filed to derail it. We believe we have a moral obligation to act to answer this lawsuit with the voices of the grassroots all over this country, with the voices of the people we represent, because we know that in our cities are a huge percentage of the almost 12 million people who are not yet documented, but are still our constituents who we honor and respect. The cities are in the front lines of this issue, and we know what the impact of all these individuals' participation in our economy and our cities is. And we know it's our obligation to find ways to appreciate and respect their hard work, how they have helped to build our cities and our nation. And we think the executive action by the President is an important step. Now, I hasten to add, we believe in the need for a fully comprehensive immigration reform passed by the Congress. But until that day, the President's executive action moves us forward and is a call to arms. So many of my colleagues have been working so hard, our staffs have been working so hard to prepare to implement the executive action locally. One of the mayors who couldn't be here but has been in the forefront of this effort is the mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti. I'd like to thank him for his good work. And it's not just mayors who are standing up in favor of the President's executive action. There's 12 states and the District of Columbia have filed amicus briefs, and 27 law enforcement officials from around the country have filed amicus briefs as well. But we believe the voices of cities are particularly crucial here, have not been heard enough in this debate up to now, and we want to change that because we believe this country will be stronger when it's more inclusive and more fair to all. We gathered in New York in December. We put together a plan of action. Many of us, and a lot who couldn't be there, have been participating since, create a war room approach in which we are going to coordinate actions all over the country. We're going to have a national day of action in favor of immigration reform and the executive action. We're going to have a lobby day on Capitol Hill with mayors from around the country. We intend to make the voices of cities heard in the immigration debate. We know that delay means that families are not served. And that's why we want to stand in the way of this lawsuit that we know would undermine the needs of families in our city. So just a couple of words in Spanish, and then I'm going to turn to some of my colleagues. Hoy, más de 30 alcaldes nos hemos reunido para apoyar el plan del presidente de ayudar a millones de inmigrantes indocumentados. Estamos entregando documentos en la Corte en oposición a la demanda que busca parar el plan del presidente. Como alcaldes, estamos comprometidos a una reforma migratoria real que solucione los problemas del actual sistema. With that, I want to turn to a mayor who really has been one of the leaders nationally in terms of innovating what cities can do to serve their immigrants in all sorts of creative ways, even while we wait for national action. Mayor Ed Lee of San Francisco.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and I want to express my appreciation to Mayor de Blasio for having led a very important discussion last month with at least 20 mayors across the country in New York about the executive order and how we can prepare. In San Francisco, we are filing our friend of the court brief to support President Obama's executive action. We understand, we've been very detailed observers, along with all the other mayors here, of the conversation in this entire country about the need for comprehensive immigration reform. And without that reform, we could not wait when we're looking at the eyes of thousands of our immigrants who might be standing in the shadows in doubt when an officer of our police department is engaging them, or when our public health official or school official is engaging them, that they will be less engaged in the full services of our city and also the necessary connections that we have to have. That if we have communities that are in doubt about what their status is, they're going to be less cooperative, certainly less trustworthy. And so in our city, not only have we been historically a sanctuary city of San Francisco, we've also been on the front lines to offer a municipal identification card, just as New York has been doing, to the great satisfaction of many people who said that they want to be here. They are already paying taxes. They want to enjoy the full privilege. And while waiting for that comprehensive reform, we want to do what we can to make sure that our connections to all of our communities are strong. This is not also simply what I think that dialogue has been. This is not just affecting Latino Americans and Americans in general. This is Asian Americans. This is Americans from Europe countries, African countries, as well as Latin American countries. As a son of immigrant parents, I know personally that this affects the trust that people have in your local government. So we're going to do all we can to make sure that we aggressively have the programs that welcome in our immigrants, particularly our undocumented, to make sure that they're safe, to make sure that they are welcome to participate in all aspects, to make sure that they are on their road to pathways to citizenship. And we have and are continue willing to put our general resources into action in light of the fact that Congress won't act. I want to praise President Obama again for his leadership, his courage to do this at a time when the conversations across the country, what are we going to do to make sure that we, as cities, represent everybody we can and make sure that they're always involved. And I want to thank the rest of our mayors for joining and standing up on not only this action, but the continued work that they do day in and day out to get our immigrant communities involved in our schools, in our health systems, and also trusting law enforcement. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Mayor Anise Parker of Houston has created a thriving economy and an inclusive economy, and I think has given us a great example of what it means to get all communities involved in prosperity together. Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor. If you see someone drowning, you throw them a lifeline. If you see a fire, you pull the fire alarm. If you come upon an accident, you offer first aid. You step up in a crisis. What our president has done is step up in a crisis where Congress has failed to act. We all support secure borders for the United States. We want a safe country. But we also understand that we have human beings who are a fact on the ground in our cities who need a solution, and Congress has failed to act. This is a crisis situation, and our president has appropriately stepped up and taken action and set a standard that we hope our duly elected representatives in Congress will heed and craft their own solution for the country. But we are here in support of the president's action because it was necessary and appropriate, and we really can't wait any longer. Now, I grew up on the American dream. I took in that dream with my mother's milk, and I lived it every day, seeing my parents and my grandparents succeed. Is it any surprise to us in America that the so-called American dream is a dream that we have exported around the world. We attract the best and the brightest and the hardest working and the visionaries from around the world, and they come to our cities and they try to build their future. And many of those were brought here as children. No choice in the matter, and they took in the American dream in the same way I did. When we fail to act on immigration, we make our cities less safe because we create a population that is afraid to access police services. When we fail to act on immigration, we make our cities less economically secure because we help foster an underground economy. And when we fail to act on immigration, we rip families apart. These are people who pay taxes, who build our cities, and who contribute to our economy. There is no one right path to immigration reform, but it must happen. And this is a bold step forward that we as mayors embrace because our constituents deserve it and demand it. Thank you.
Now, Mayor Nutter of Philadelphia was going to speak at this point, and he is just finishing another panel, so he'll join us in just a moment. Let me move ahead to a mayor who's really done a lot for immigrants and refugees in his city, an incredibly diverse city, Mayor Ed Murray of Seattle.
Well, thank you. And first, I have to say hello from the city of the Seahawks. Thank you. I want to thank Mayor de Blasio for his leadership in organizing mayors across this country to address this issue. You know, Seattle is a very innovative place. It has a very innovative economy. And in part, it does because 1 in 5 Seattleites was born in another country. It does because the most diverse zip code in America is in Seattle. In one neighborhood alone, there are 125 different languages spoken. But our innovative economy and the incredible iconic businesses we have cannot continue to be successful if we do not solve the issue of immigration. The backlog of folks that they need to hire is significant. And it's not just in Seattle, it's in our state. When you look at our growing and incredible wine industry, our agriculture, our apples, our wheat, that economy will not work unless we deal with the issue of immigration. That's why we are here to support the president. It is an economic issue. It's about the future vitality of the economy of our city, of our state, and of this country. But it is, as Mayor de Blasio said, also a moral issue because we have a lot of work left to do. We talk about dreamers, these young people who dream to finish college, but they are at risk of losing the other dreamers, their parents who gave them that dream, unless we address immigration reform. That is why this issue is so important. And as we've talked about at this conference and as we've talked about over the last year, cities are innovators. Cities are leading the way. And I believe that the work that we are doing here today under Mayor de Blasio's leadership will address this issue, will finally make Congress act, and will finally bring us to a point where we're not talking about the president's actions, we're talking about this country finally addressing this issue. And you know, to end with, I started with innovation, and not just the Seahawks, but we are innovative because of immigration. Whether it's Mayor Lee's parents who immigrated to Seattle, whether it's Mayor de Blasio's parents or grandparents and my grandparents who came from Italy and Ireland, that's the American story. If we don't fix this, we risk hurting the American story. So again, thank you, Mayor de Blasio, and to my fellow mayors for stepping forward.
Thank you very much. A great, passionate national voice on this issue has been Mayor Pedro Segarra of Hartford, Connecticut. He has just been selected as the co-chair of the Conference of Mayors Immigration Reform Task Force. Mayor Segarra. He will favor you in 2 languages.
My Spanish is not as good looking as Mayor de Blasio's Spanish, but I will address in Spanish. I will be serving as the co-chair with Mayor Tate. We had our first meeting during this conference, met with Secretary of Homeland Security, Secretary Johnson, to go over what the executive order is and what the executive order is not. We're committed to working with other mayors along the lines of communicating that to our constituents and our residents that can take advantage of the executive order. But we will also continue to work on comprehensive immigration reform, which is so vastly necessary in this country. As I look around my colleagues, what you see here is diversity. And that, I think, is a tradition of our country, and that is a tradition that must continue in the future in terms of immigration policy. So, para los residentes hispanos, estamos apoyando a nuestro presidente Obama en cuanto a la implementación de la orden ejecutiva que evita la deportación de más de 5 millones de residentes en este país. Estamos comprometidos como alcalde de reconocer la importancia que tiene el tema de inmigración en nuestro país y trabajar colaborativamente para llevar la información a nuestros pueblos, a nuestros residentes, porque esta nación es una nación de inmigrantes y esa tradición se tiene que honrar a través de una reforma migratoria comprensiva. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, a really extraordinary story is what has happened in the state of Utah on these issues. One of the leading voices has been Mayor Ralph Becker, the mayor of Salt Lake City. He is also the president of the National League of Cities, and I think he's been one of the great conveners of people of different parties, different views, creating some real consensus around the need for immigration reform. Mayor Becker.
Thank you, Mayor de Blasio, for your incredible leadership on this issue as on so many issues that are important to us in cities. I'm here as the mayor of Salt Lake City, but also as president of the National League of Cities. And the National League of Cities has signed on to this amicus brief as well, representing all of the cities across the country. Immigration reform, as we know, is long overdue. For years, the National League of Cities has called for federal action to fix the nation's broken immigration system. After interminable delays stretching over 2 administrations, we applaud and support the President for taking action to address this problem. But cities and our families need federal policymakers working together to go even further than the President's action. We in cities work together to get things done. Without a more comprehensive approach that addresses issues like providing resources to integrate immigrant families into our cities, the problems associated with our current immigration system will continue. The President and Congress need to ensure that our country has a strong and modern immigration system. It's good for our communities, and as has been so eloquently stated, it's right for our families. So we thank, again, the President for his action to help our communities, and we urge Congress to get past its partisan divides and address and complete comprehensive immigration reform. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lastly, a man who I think some people actually are living legends, and Tom Cochran qualifies. For decades, a leading voice on behalf of the cities of this country, and now, of course, CEO and Executive Director of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, Tom Cochran.
Thank you, Mayor de Blasio. There are 3 issues here. One is this executive action. One is a suit in Texas, and the other one is continuing comprehensive immigration reform. We have a long-standing task force headed up by Mayor Pedro Segarra and a Republican mayor of Anaheim, Mayor Tate. First, this is not the first executive action, Mayor de Blasio. President Roosevelt asked us to stand up with him to supply war machinery and planes to fight Hitler. President Kennedy called us to stand in front of the Brandenburg Gate and to support the Berlin airlift. President Reagan called us, Mayor Lee, to meet and talk to Secretary Schultz, who lives in your city, to support the SALT II talks after he met with Gorbachev. President Clinton had an executive action to prop up the Mexican peso, and we supported it. I'm tired of writing letters to Congress about immigration reform. And I think when the president, like a mayor, takes action like this, our organization stands to support this suit and to let you know that we must continue to work on immigration reform, which we will. So on behalf of the Conference of Mayors, a bipartisan organization, we're pleased to announce that we are joining in an amicus brief to support Mayor de Blasio, and I think, what, 13 governors? We've got a lot of company on this, and we feel very strongly about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we welcome your questions on this topic. Yes.
Many activists say that the lawsuit in Texas poses a greater danger to the executive actions of whatever Congress is doing or not accomplishing right now. What's the political weight that you think this amicus brief brings, considering the weight of 20-something states in this lawsuit? And what do you think is the outlook on this lawsuit right now?
I'll give my answer, and again, I want to welcome to any of my colleagues who want to jump in on any of the questions, feel free. I think the simple answer is this: as you heard, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, bipartisan organization, filing an amicus brief as well. The National League of Cities, bipartisan organization, filing a brief. States around the country, law enforcement officials, the mayors you see here representing whole different parts of this country, but united in this view that we have to support executive action. I think that matters a lot, and I think if you simply get to the facts, as Mr. Cochran pointed out, facts are presidents have used executive actions over generations to achieve valid goals, particularly in the absence of congressional action. This president is no different. Some of the attacks on him are ideological, and we wanted to act as a shield to say we want to respect the right of the president to do what so many other presidents have done when national needs are going unmet. And I think that this will be an important counterbalance to the lawsuit.
Is this a measure of your concern as mayors of the outcome of this lawsuit right now?
I think we are confident that the president's in the right, but we also think it's very important to visibly defend him. Anyone else want to add? If not, we'll go to the questions. Please.
Are any of the 30 mayors that you were talking about, are any of them Republican?
Of the group here, none are Republicans, some are independents. But again, one of the things we agreed on last month in New York is that we are starting an effort to recruit in Republican mayors who believe as we do. Now some, and Mayor Becker is an expert on this fact, some would be willing to support the executive action. Some might not be willing to support executive action, but would support comprehensive immigration reform. But everyone you see here is going to be talking to our fellow mayors who are Republican to get them involved in this effort. Questions? Have we left you speechless? What a refreshing change. Okay, those of you who are independents, clarify. There's some people are not here right now who signed on, so some of the people who signed on are not present. So we will get you the full list. All right, yours is an independent. Do you want to step forward?
I'm listening very intently, but I'm delighted. Frankly, I'm also from Texas.
Come on up.
From Texas.
Yeah, Nelda Martinez, Mayor of Corpus Christi, Texas. From Texas, obviously, this is critical for us being a border town, but also we understand all of the states it affects us because we have interstates that are traveled with many that work each and every day that do not have the legal status. We have to deal with immigration. This has been strong of a priority that have come from the public on the nation, the importance of our economy, protecting our families, and also having a path to immigration. Whoever is controlling Congress, I guess it's, incidentally, we just happen to have a Democrat president who finally has had the courage to make the bold move to finally do something that everybody's been talking about across partisan lines, Republican, Democrat, Independent. So what we need to do is make sure that our voices are heard. The reason you have so many more of the governors in the states that are Republican because we know who's controlling Congress right now. But why can't we have the voice of the people control rational decision-making and finally coming to a solution regarding what we all know needs to be solved in immigration? So I thank all of you all for coming here today. We stand strong with our President of the United States, Democrat, independent, and many of you have interviewed many Republicans saying they want they want to have reform in immigration. So you go to them again. Put the executive order out of the way. We're here standing behind the bold move, but put the executive order out of the way. So what makes it any different now? Strategically? Politics? Let's deal with the real problem and have real solutions. Thank you.
Okay. Last call. Yes? Yes, when we gathered, and again, I'm going to welcome up any colleagues who haven't spoken and want to jump in. When we gathered in New York last month, the whole concept was talk about how to maximize the impact of this executive action for our cities. Because you can imagine, if this is going to reach almost 5 million people, you could count the huge impact it's going to have on all the cities represented here. So what our staffs are doing is literally working out how we're going to support people, get them to process their forms, get them in to understand what their rights are and their opportunities are. So that groundwork is being laid right now. We believe the executive action will prevail, so we're assuming that the implementation starts in the next few months. Anyone want to add? Please.
I'll add to that. I'm Charlie Hales. I'm the mayor of Portland. Let me add to that. One of the reasons why this is significant is not this partisan question at all. It's that mayors are grounded in the everyday reality and in real time, and we hear from our citizens. So one consequence, I think, of the failure of the president's action, if it were reversed, would be that our citizens are going to have to try to ad hoc their way through these difficulties. Let me make that real for you. There's a man in Portland named Francisco Aguirre. Thousands of Portlanders came together to offer him sanctuary in a local church because he was going to be separated from his family by the lack of a good immigration policy that makes sense in people's lives. I would expect other Portlanders and citizens of all of our communities to figure out improvised solutions to protect their neighbors from the lack of good policy. And we'd rather that our fellow citizens worked on more productive things than simply safeguarding and sanctuarying people who are productive members of our communities. I think at a real human level, that's what we'll see in the absence of federal policy, is the citizens are much more pragmatic and have good hearts on this subject, and I think you'd see both that pragmatism and good-heartedness expressed in ways like we saw in Augustana Lutheran Church in Portland.
I want to note on your question, absolutely. On your question, another thing that's been very powerful is that all these cities are working together to figure out how we can do this best. And you know, there's the concept of best practices in government. This is sort of the next level. We are all in a constant dialogue, comparing notes, trying to figure out how we can get this to help the maximum number of people. The federal government has been very helpful in that. When we met at Gracie Mansion, Secretary Jay Johnson, the Homeland Security Secretary was there, Valerie Jarrett, the President's senior advisor was there. So the federal government has been very willing to help us figure out how to maximize this for our people, but what's going on now is we're all constantly communicating about how to get ready to make this real for our residents in the next few months. Yes?
Mayor, one of our released a report that says that Mexican children have been returned to Mexico within 72 hours without any possibility of going to a judge and explain reasons for them to come, many times escaping from Mexico's violence. Do you think the Mexican children must receive the same treatment that has been given to the Central American children that are trying either reunite with their parents or have an opportunity here?
I'll speak broadly, and maybe one of my other colleagues wants to jump in. I mean, look, I think for a lot of us, and it gets to Mayor Hale's comment a moment ago, we see this in very human terms. I think that's one thing that being a mayor brings out in you in a very deep way. You deal with every kind of people from every kind of background, and our job is to serve all of them. and we are all international cities more and more. So when we had a lot of the unaccompanied children come up from Central America, of course there were some voices that said, well, what will this mean in terms of the cost or the burden on our schools? And what we heard, certainly in New York City, was that question was immediately put to rest by so many leaders and so many community residents saying, these are our children too. These children were in a violent atmosphere, their lives were threatened. If we can help provide them safe homes, that was a natural thing for us to do. So I think that's true, obviously, for any children facing those threats, particularly in neighboring countries. Anyone else want to? Hold on one second. Anyone want to see if anyone wants to add? Feel free. Oh, okay, tell them.
How do you explain the Republican opposition to the immigration reform? Is that philosophical or is political?
Well, I'll only say from my point of view, again, others may have a different view, but from my point of view, there is more diversity of opinion. I think our colleague from Corpus Christi said it accurately. We have heard very openly Republicans all over the country talk about the need to address this issue. They may not have signed on to the leading vision of comprehensive immigration reform. They may not have signed on to the executive action, but I have to be fair and say there's a lot of people in the Republican Party who are acknowledging the need for action. We believe that getting something started is crucial, and that, in fact, a first step will open the door to a more comprehensive action. So I believe over time you will hear more and more of our Republican colleagues speaking up on this issue. All right.